The idea that self-help and, you know, reaching out to guys who feel they need a father figure is the in to Jordan Peterson, and then it's like chauvinism from there. People aren't simply manipulated into conservatism. IMO gives them things they want. It gives them things they want because they want things relative to the worldview they've been sold. And self-help is like a good insecurity to exploit. We know that Jordan Peterson is uniquely prominent because of his self-help stuff, because that was the entire like line on how he became a powerful conservative figure. That was the whole like through line. But if it's not that, if it's like, well, the people who go to Jordan Peterson would have gone to any conservative anyway because they like the conservatism, then it seems like it kind of is essentialist, right? What do you stop then? Where do you draw the line? Where do you bring the wall down? Jordan Peterson literally works for the Daily Wire. Yeah, he moved over a couple months ago. But Jordan Peterson is less popular now than he was back in 2017. And back then, he was known primarily for being a self-help figure who would ramble about conservatism. But if you take a look at why people like Jordan Peterson, or you see all the comments underneath his YouTube videos, at least his older ones, because nowadays he is much more actively partisan and much less into the self-help bit, you'll see a ton of people are like, Jordan, I was so waylaid and lost and a drug addict, and then I saw your videos, and then I knew this, and then I knew that, and, you know, sexual and masculine insecurity are the root of so many conservatives' outreach to young men. Steve Bannon talked about how he would specifically reach out to incel forums to try to recruit people to the far right. The immense popularity of people like Andrew Tate and the kinds of audiences he, you know, brings about speaks to the, you know, the effectiveness of targeting those insecurities. If it was just conservative prescriptions, they wouldn't need to bury it in all that self-help stuff. They could just do conservatism. Frankly, Andrew Tate doesn't even talk about conservatism that much, or at least that's what the people who follow him don't like. That's not what they're there for. He will say insane, unhinged conservative stuff, but if you take a look at the clips that go viral, the stuff people know him for, the stuff his fans talk about, the stuff they seem to respect, it's all about what he has to say about masculinity. And if you're talking about selling young men advice on how to be masculine, insecurity is the root of what's being engaged with there. A lot of them do think that it's apolitical. They think he's not even doing politics. They think he's just like, remasculinizing media by projecting an image of what it means to be, you know, blah, 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 blah. You've seen it a million times before, though maybe not this loudly, not as loud as with Tate. His comments on women are hella conservative, though. Chill left. They are. But you might notice that Andrew Tate doesn't frame his comments on women as policy. When he talks about his prescriptions on women, he's not talking about anything legalistic, and he's also not talking about anything perceptively ethical or political. He's not making arguments that sound like they belong in a like poli-sci classroom. He's making intuitive comments about the role of the men and women in a natural order. And why would young men be interested in being sold that worldview? Well, probably because a lot of them think they're getting shafted by the existing one, that the existing one is one in which feminism has corrupted Western women to make them forget their role, to make them sort of hypergamous, unworkable, degenerate. But these terms don't just emerge fully formed in the minds of 12-year-old boys. They have to be seeded. They have to be groomed into it. And, I mean, much is the case with politics as well as sexual grooming. Any kind of grooming relies on playing off insecurities, doesn't it? I mean, think about grooming, like not the way conservatives use it, but think of the way it actually like means grooming. You target people's insecurities, separate them from others, convince them of a worldview that is convenient to you. In the case of Tate, it makes him a lot of money, you know, in the case of sexual predators and, you know, that stuff. But insecurity is at the heart of it. People who aren't insecure are really difficult to groom. Genuine question, why is it, do you think, that young women don't generally grow up believing extremely hostile things about how men should be subjugated? Well, a couple things. First of all, there actually is a pretty big turfy, hate-all-men femcel crowd growing through TikTok right now. That is a coming problem. We will reckon with this. There might not be as socially powerful, but it's a thing. But secondly, I think there are a couple of points. We don't live in a latently matriarchal society, so, young girls growing up aren't as likely to encounter anti-male answers to insecurities and questions they have. Also, women just don't have the same dating and life experiences in their young lives that men do. The concern with women and women's insecurities tends not to be, will the guys think I'm creepy? Not to say that can't happen. It's just, I don't think it's anywhere near as common as it is with guys. But rather, fears of violence or fears of being a slut or being called a slut. Stuff like that. It's more specific, it's different, and those are certainly problems, but I don't think they lend themselves to the same kinds of exploitative far-right messaging. It is because the far-right's politics overlap with possible prescriptions to the insecurities of young men that they are targeting that. Though it is worth pointing out that there are efforts from the religious right to groom young women into conservatism using the kind of opposite tactic, where they tell young women that if they're unladylike, no man will ever want them, and if they're not married by 23, then they're barely worth anything anyway, and if they have sex before marriage, they're a slut. And as a product of all of that, they sell them reactionary politics in the framework of, this is what you need to do to be a good woman. And in so doing, female insecurity is used as an inroad for conservative political grooming, the trad wife bullshit. I don't think it's as common, though, because that one, those prescriptions are usually, they have to be like built up more, and usually religion plays a factor, and it just needs more of a setup. But it's possible. It happens. I want to be clear, by the way, like, none of this is me saying that, like, the patriarchy isn't a factor. It's the factor. I mean, the fact that we live in a system where it is so easy to exploit young men's sexual insecurities for the benefit of the far right is patriarchy. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, that is a function of the system. I'm just talking about the logic by which it operates. You see this all the time with all kinds of bigotries. It's always fear. It's always insecurity. It's always disgust. It's one of the three. It's an intuitive, negative feeling that builds up, and they're given political prescriptions to legitimize it post hoc. And we see that, so often. Okay, everyone gets what I'm saying, right? We all get what I'm coming at here? Okay. I feel like I've talked about this a lot, but it's worth talking about. It's just a matter of, like, the logic of these systems and the way they operate. Much in the same way that I've used this example before, but just to quickly reiterate, for a lot of people who are like those, they took our gerbs, like, get them back over the border, this is America, get these Mexicans out or whatever. If you approached their racism, if you were to, like, directly engage with them, and you were like, dude, why do you hate Mexicans? Why are you racist? A lot of them would instantly rebuke what you've said and start talking about how, like, they're a drain on our system, or they're taking the jobs, or, like, it just doesn't work that way, or they need to follow the law. If they're going to come to this country, they need to follow the system. And what you'll often find is that, well, a lot of these people absolutely do hate Mexicans, and they're all racist for what they're doing and saying. The motivating force for their racism was not just them waking up and going, well, white supremacy benefits me politically, so it would be to my advantage if I am racist. They get sold on the idea that their tenuous grasp on economic well-being is being threatened by the behavior of others, that there's a system, and that system is a zero-sum game. There's only enough in it for so many people, and that is being preyed upon and leeched away at. If racism itself was enough, if pure, undiluted, concentrated racism was sufficient, racists would not need to give 57 million lies about how people of other races are doing any kind of harm to our country. If sexism itself was enough, then sexists would not need to lie repeatedly about society broadly, or in the nature of this or that or the other. People just don't tend to do things where they're like, yeah, I want to be anti-equality. I want to hurt other people because it's to my benefit. People don't tend to think that way. Some do, mind you, but oftentimes people are convinced that it's actually the right thing to do, usually because it's a defensive reaction to harm being done to them. In the case of insecure young guys, they think that feminism is destroying the West and also ruining male-female relationships. In the case of a lot of racists, they think that interracial engagement, relationships, proximity is causing a lot of harm for everyone, or at least the very least America and the white people in it. It's like they're sold ideas on how the world works, and if the world works that way, thus necessarily, and then you get the prescriptions about racism or sexism or whatever, and you have to work on that. People who think like that are usually called abusers. I don't know which exact statement you're referring to, but people who are abusive in relationships also usually believe that their bad behavior is a necessary, defensive, or at least justifiable reaction to the conditions they are in that relationship. That's how everyone does bad things. Very few people do bad things because they think, oh, this is to my benefit, therefore I will do bad thing. They'll like justify it. We're very good at justifying our behavior. We have to, because we have strong ideas of what it means to be like a good member of society. Yeah, very few people think they're the bad guy, you know? Even if you have somebody like, say, Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin did a lot of bad things, and he knew he did a lot of bad things. But if you read up on him, he often felt that the bad things that he did were justifiable, or at the very least morally neutral, because he considered himself a force of history. He was a very paranoid man, so a lot of the people he killed, he did so out of fits of paranoia. One might call that a kind of insecurity. But he also thought himself like he was historically powerful enough to be beyond a man. He was a force in history. He began to see himself not as a guy making active, conscious decisions, but rather as the moving tide, a storm on the horizon, as an earthquake, as the tremor of a volcano, as something beyond moral assessment. He may have acknowledged that he caused harm, or maybe that he did things that led to others being hurt. And he did acknowledge this, but not as a moral function. You know, Zizek had an entire talk about this, where he talked about this kind of reflexive pseudo-Buddhist cynicism, where people who did horrific war crimes in like Unit 731 or whatever in occupied Manchuria or whatever else, you know, war crimes abroad, they will think, you know, in this Eastern fashion, you know, am I the one who's like raping and beheading this captured civilian woman? No, the universe is doing it, and I am simply acting as an agent of the universe. I am like a gust of wind or an eddy of water swirling in the ocean. You know, I am simply the hand of the universe doing the raping and the killing. Obviously, this is psychotic. It's essentially a kind of religiously tinted strategic disassociation, but it is what some people told themselves as a way of justifying the fact that they committed war crimes. People will go to tremendous lengths to avoid feeling like they are consciously doing a bad thing. We're basically biologically programmed not to do that, because sociable behavior is literally written in our DNA. Sociable behavior is tied heavily to the ethics with which we treat others. This is why we consider sociopathy or antisocial personality disorder to be actual disorders, like flaws in the brain, rather than just personality things. We are designed to behave certain ways, so people will go to great lengths. It's copium. It's copium. People will inhale lots of copium if it means feeling they're not behaving unethically, willfully. A problem is that women are dismissed and accused of lying or capping when we give guys advice about women if it does not fit red pill truths, e.g. we are not that different. Stop generalizing. Yes, that is true, and that's one of the things that makes it important for guys to lean in on this. Because if women try to appeal to insecure guys and they're like, come on, guys, not every chick is like a super gold digger, whatever. The woman's going to get a lot of misogynistic bullshit thrown at them. One of the best ways to disarm reflexive insecurity is to be really, really good at making your statement layered in a way that they won't want to reject. And one of the best ways you can do this is by being casually sexual in these communities. So, for example, if you're like a guy and you're talking to a like red pillar or an incel, and you're like, listen up, mister, not all women are gold diggers. There are girls who really value personality. He's not gonna fucking listen to you, okay? But if you're like, dude, come on. Like, I know short guys, I know ugly guys, I know poor guys. They get lots of pussy. They're just confident. Listen, I'm not saying it doesn't help to be hot, but listen, please trust me, okay? I was getting laid back when I was still an ugly, acne-ridden teenager. Seriously, you just yell at a woman loud enough about how much you like trains, and seriously, that'll work with some of them. There's something about the later statement where obviously I'm kind of like putting my foot on the scale by trying to be more charismatic in the second one, but there's something about being kind of not chauvinistic or misogynistic, but like casual about it. Like, you're not trying to beat them out of an ideology or like change their mind, but rather just like, yeah, dude, not a big deal. Just, you know, we got, yeah, it's a way you want to make, because then they're not going to respond to that with like, no, you're just lying, because like, it doesn't sound like you're trying to pull them out of it. It sounds like you're trying to go like, come on, man, they're not all like that, you know? And it makes it harder to engage, I think. You know? You get what I mean, right? They become attracted to conservatism because it restores things to how they're supposed to be, e.g., clear masculinity and femininity, sexuality, etc. Right, and the reason they think those things are supposed to be that way is because they believe that world will not cause for them the problems that their insecurities are causing them in this world. Sake with the 10 gifted tier 1 subs. Thank you very, very much. My goodness. I don't find any inherent worth in small booba women, but I also don't find any inherent worth in small booba men or non-binaries. Bottom line, force boobify everyone. In a world where everyone is booba equivalent to penny underbust or larger, there's no transphobia or conservatism. Actually, Sake, I'm pretty sure that conservatives are the ones who tend to prefer big tits over big ass. Like in the TNA discourse, they're the ones who tend to favor the T. You might be totally off on this.